Tonight's story isn't just scary, it's real. Welcome to Haunt Pod, the home of chilling true horror stories from the darkest corners of the internet. So turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself. Because once this story starts, there's no turning back. Subscribe to Haunt Pod for more terrifying true horror stories. Now sit back, stay alert, and enjoy the nightmare.
Last year, a man I barely knew told me the exact color of my bedroom walls. I had never invited him inside. I had never even told him my address. That was the moment I stopped sleeping with my window open. I had just moved into a small rental house on the edge of town. It was cheap, it was quiet, and it needed work, but it was mine. I was excited, honestly. First place on my own. My friend Dana helped me carry boxes in on moving day, and that's when I met him, Mr. Alden. He lived 2 houses down, an older man, maybe 60, always in the same gray jacket. He waved at us from his porch and said, "Nice to have someone young on the street again." Friendly enough, normal enough. I waved back and didn't think much of it. There was one thing, though, a small thing I barely noticed at the time. His house had bars on every window, even the little one on the side, the kind you'd think nobody would bother to break into. I figured it was just an old habit from living somewhere rougher years ago. The first week was fine. I unpacked, met a couple other neighbors, started my new commute. Then Mr. Alden started showing up, not in a scary way, not at first. He'd be watering his lawn when I left for work and say something like, "Long shift again? You always leave at 7:42. I laughed it off. Small towns, I thought. People notice things. Old men have nothing better to do than watch the street. One evening, he mentioned my dog by name, though I hadn't gotten a dog yet. Only Dana had joked about getting me one as a housewarming gift. I told myself he must have overheard us talking on moving day. That was the only explanation that made sense, so I let it go. For a few weeks, nothing happened. I settled in. I stopped noticing Mr. Alden as much because he stopped appearing every time I stepped outside. Dana came over for dinner and said the street seemed peaceful, said I got lucky finding a quiet place like this. I agreed. I actually started to like the neighborhood. I even waved first at Mr. Alden a couple times, feeling a little guilty for being suspicious of a lonely old man who probably just wanted company. Then one night, I couldn't find my phone charger. I searched my whole bedroom, and I remembered clearly that I had left it plugged in by the bed that morning. It was gone. I didn't think much of it, figured I misplaced it somewhere in the move. 2 days later, I found it in the exact same spot, plugged in, like it had never left. I told myself I just missed it the first time. But that night, I noticed my window latch was undone. I always locked it. Always. I stood there staring at it for a long time before I convinced myself I must have forgotten just once. A week after that, I ran into Mr. Alden buying groceries. He smiled and said, "You should really fix that squeaky drawer in your kitchen, 3rd one from the left." I don't use that drawer. I had never mentioned it to anyone. I laughed along with him in the store because I didn't know what else to do, but my hands were shaking by the time I got to my car. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the lights off, listening. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps on the gravel path beside my house, slow, deliberate, stopping right under my bedroom window. I froze. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at the ceiling and listened to my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The footsteps stopped completely. Then I heard something scrape against the glass, soft like a fingernail dragging along the pane. I lay there for what felt like an hour, too afraid to even turn my head toward the window, praying whoever it was would just walk away. Eventually, the sound stopped. I didn't check. I just stayed frozen until the sky outside started turning gray with morning light. The next night, I decided I needed to know. I turned off every light in the house and sat in the dark living room watching the street through a gap in the curtains. Around the same time, I saw him, Mr. Alden, standing at the edge of my yard, just standing there, facing my house, not moving. I don't know how long he had been there before I saw him. My whole body went cold. I grabbed my phone to call Dana, my hands shaking so bad I could barely hit the buttons. When I looked back up, he was gone. Not walking, gone. I checked every direction. Nothing. I ran to my bedroom and locked the door, which felt useless the second I did it because the window latch had been broken since that first strange night. I shoved my dresser in front of it anyway and sat on the floor with my back against my bed, phone gripped in both hands, listening to every creak the house made. That's when I heard it. A voice, close, right outside the window, low, calm, almost gentle. It said my name. Just my name, nothing else. I didn't answer, I didn't move. I sat there until the sun came up, too terrified to even cry. In the morning, I packed a bag and went straight to Dana's place. I told her everything. She went pale and admitted something she hadn't told me before. She'd seen Mr. Alden standing outside my house at night once, weeks earlier, and convinced herself she imagined it because it didn't make sense in daylight. Hearing her say that made my stomach drop. It wasn't just me. It had never been just me. I called the landlord that same day and broke the lease. I never went back inside that house again, not even for my things. Dana drove by a week later to grab what she could of my stuff, and she said Mr. Alden's house looked empty. No car, no lights, curtains gone from every window. She knocked anyway. No answer. I looked him up later, asked around the old neighbors, checked whatever records I could find. Nobody had a last name for him beyond Alden. Nobody remembered exactly when he'd moved in. One neighbor swore he'd lived there for 20 years. Another swore the house had been empty until right before I moved in. I still have the phone charger. I never got rid of it, even though I don't know why I kept it. Every time I see it in a drawer, I think about that squeaky drawer he mentioned, the one I never told anyone about, and I wonder how long he had been in my house before I ever knew his name.
I never thought I would come back to my grandmother's house after everything that happened, but 3 months ago I had no choice. My grandmother passed away in early spring. She lived alone in a small house at the edge of a forest, about 2 hours outside the city. My mom asked me to go clean out the house before we sold it. I said yes, mostly because I needed the money and partly because I hadn't visited that house since I was a kid. I remembered bits and pieces of my childhood summers there, the creaky wooden floors, the smell of her cooking, and one thing I had almost forgotten until I pulled into the driveway. My grandmother used to tell me every single summer in a very serious voice, "Don't go near the tree line after dark, no matter what you hear." I used to think it was just something old people said to keep kids from wandering off. I never asked her what she meant. I wish I had. The house looked smaller than I remembered and more tired, paint peeling, grass overgrown. I planned to stay 3 nights, just enough time to sort through her things and get the place ready for an estate sale. The first night was quiet. I unpacked boxes, drank some coffee, and went to sleep early because the drive had worn me out. Around midnight, I woke up to a sound outside, a kind of low humming, almost like someone singing without words. I told myself it was the wind moving through the trees, or maybe an owl. The forest behind the house was thick, and I figured there were plenty of animals out there I didn't recognize. I fell back asleep without much trouble. The second day was calm. I went through closets, boxed up old photographs, called my mom to update her on the sale. Everything felt normal, almost boring. A neighbor from down the road, an older man named Walter, stopped by to say hello. He'd known my grandmother for over 20 years. We talked on the porch for a while, and I almost mentioned the sound from the night before, but it felt silly, so I didn't. That night, the humming came back, closer this time. I sat up in bed and listened. It wasn't quite singing, and it wasn't quite crying. It had a rhythm to it, like something repeating the same 3 or 4 notes over and over. I told myself again that it was an animal. Coyotes make strange sounds. Foxes can scream like people. I'd read that somewhere. I stayed in bed, and eventually the sound faded, and I fell asleep sometime after 2 in the morning. In the morning, I noticed something in the backyard. A patch of grass near the tree line was flattened down like something heavy had been lying there or standing there for a long time. I walked closer and saw the ground was disturbed, like it had been pressed in a slow circle. I told myself deer do that. I'd seen deer beds before, flattened patches and fields. I took a picture of it anyway, because something about it didn't sit right with me, though I couldn't say why. I mentioned it to Walter when he came by again that afternoon. He got quiet for a second, longer than felt normal, and then said, "Best not to worry about the tree line."
Your grandmother never did, once she learned to listen. I asked him what that meant. He just shook his head and said it was an old thing, a local thing, not worth explaining. I laughed it off, but something in his face didn't match his casual tone. His eyes kept drifting toward the trees while we talked. That third night, I decided to stay up later than usual, packing the last of the boxes in the living room. Around 11, the humming started again, but this time it didn't stay outside. It moved. I could hear it circle the house slowly, the sound rising and falling as it passed each window. I turned off the lamp and sat very still on the couch, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I kept thinking about my grandmother's voice telling me not to go near the tree line, and I wondered if she had sat in this exact spot, listening to this exact sound all those years ago. The humming stopped right outside the living room window. Then I heard something else. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the porch, the old wood groaning under weight. I stayed frozen on the couch, staring at the front door, praying it was locked. It was. I remember checking it earlier. The footsteps stopped directly in front of the door, and then there was a long pause. Nothing happened for almost a full minute. I sat there in the dark, not daring to move, my hand pressed over my own mouth so it wouldn't hear me breathing. Then, very softly, almost like a whisper pressed right against the wood, I heard my own name. I don't know how it knew my name. I hadn't told Walter I was staying alone. I hadn't posted anything online about the trip, but it said my name again, low and slow, stretching out each letter like it was tasting it. I grabbed my phone and ran for the back bedroom, locked that door too, and sat on the floor with my back against the bed frame. The footsteps moved around the house, slow and even, circling toward the back. I heard them stop right outside the bedroom window. The glass was old and thin, and I could see a shape pressed close to it, blocking out what little moonlight came through. I didn't look directly at it. I stared at the floor and counted my own breaths until the shape moved away. I didn't sleep at all that night. At dawn, the sound was gone, and the yard outside looked completely normal, like nothing had happened. I left the house that morning, hours before I planned to. I called Walter from the road and asked him straight out what was in those woods. He was quiet again, and then he said something I hadn't been able to shake. He said my grandmother used to leave a bowl of something on the back porch every single night, right up until the week she died, and that she always went back inside before it got dark. He said he didn't know what was in the bowl, and he never asked her. When I told my mom about all of this later, she went pale and said she remembered the bowl too from when she was young, but she always assumed it was just for stray cats. I never went back to finish packing the house. My mom hired someone else to handle the rest. But I still think about that voice saying my name through the door, low and patient, like it had all the time in the world. I still think about the bowl on the porch and the 20 summers my grandmother spent making sure it was never empty. I don't know what my grandmother was feeding, or why it stopped when she died, or why it knew my name, and I think that's the part that scares me the most. Last year, I took a job I should have said no to.
and to this day I wonder what would have happened if I had just stayed home that night. I was 23, broke and behind on rent. A friend of mine told me about an opening at a storage facility on the edge of town. Night shift, 9 to 5, mostly just sitting at a desk and watching cameras. Easy money, he said. I needed easy money, so I took it. The place was huge, rows and rows of storage units, some the size of a closet, some big enough to park a truck inside. My job was simple. Sit in the front office, watch the security monitors, and do a walkthrough every 2 hours with a flashlight, just to make sure the gates were locked and nothing looked wrong. The manager who trained me, an older guy named Frank, mentioned one thing before he left for the night. He said Unit 1114, near the back, had been rented out for years, but the owner never came by. He said, "Don't worry about it. Just don't go poking around inside units that aren't yours to open." I didn't think anything of it. I just nodded and said, "Sure." The first few nights were boring in the best way. I watched movies on my phone, drank too much coffee, did my walkthroughs, and went home. The cameras showed empty rows of metal doors under orange lights. Nothing moved except the moths. On my fourth night, during my 2 a.m. walk, I heard something. A scraping sound, metal on concrete, coming from somewhere near the back of the lot. I stopped and listened. It didn't repeat. I told myself it was probably a loose gate hinge or maybe a raccoon knocking something over. The wind was picking up that night too, so I figured that was it. I finished my walk and went back to the office. Nothing happened for almost 2 weeks after that. I stopped thinking about the sound entirely. I even joked about it to Frank during a shift changeover, and he laughed and said the wind does weird things out there at night. That settled it in my mind. Just wind. Then, on a Tuesday night, I was doing my 1 a.m. walk when I noticed Unit 1114 was different. The padlock that always hung on the door was sitting on the ground instead, still locked, but detached from the latch, like someone had unscrewed the latch itself from the door. I stood there for a second, flashlight shaking a little in my hand. I told myself maybe it had been like that for a while and I just never noticed. I didn't open the door, I just wrote it in the log and moved on, faster than usual. 2 nights later, I was in the office when one of the monitors flickered, not the picture, just a flicker of static, the kind that lasts less than a second. I almost missed it. When it cleared, one of the cameras, the one covering the row where Unit 1114 sat, was pointed at a slightly different angle than before, like someone had reached up and nudged it, just an inch. I checked the footage. There was nothing there, just the flicker and then the new angle. No person, no shadow, nothing walking through frame. I called Frank the next morning before I went to sleep and asked if the cameras had been serviced recently. He said no, nobody had touched them in months. I didn't tell him about the latch. I don't know why. I think part of me didn't want to say it out loud and make it real. The following week, on a slow, cold night, I was doing my 2 a.m. walk and I smelled something before I saw anything. A thick, sour smell, like wet copper and old meat, coming from the row with Unit 1114. I stopped walking. My flashlight beam landed on the door. The latch was screwed back on. The padlock was hanging normally, closed, like nothing had ever happened. I stood there for a long time, longer than I want to admit, and that's when I heard breathing. Not wind, not a machine. Slow, wet breathing, coming from somewhere close, maybe behind the rows of storage units to my left. I turned my flashlight that direction and saw nothing but empty concrete and shadows between the metal doors. The breathing stopped the second the light hit that direction. I didn't run. I walked fast back to the office, and I locked the door behind me, which I had never done before on a shift. I sat there with the lights off, watching the monitors, telling myself it was an animal, telling myself it was nothing, and I didn't move for almost an hour. Around 3 a.m., one of the monitors showed movement, a shape low to the ground, moving between 2 rows, gone before I could really process what I was looking at. It didn't move like a person walking. It moved low and fast, close to the ground, and then it was gone behind a corner. I sat frozen in that chair with my hand over my mouth, barely breathing, watching that monitor, waiting for it to come back into frame. It didn't. Not on that camera. But a minute later, the camera covering the front gate,
the one closest to the office, showed the same low shape crossing the lot, coming toward the building. I turned off the desk lamp and got down behind the counter. I don't remember deciding to do it. My body just did it. I heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, circling the trailer that served as the office. Then nothing. Then a soft knock on the glass door 3 times, evenly spaced, like someone testing if anyone was inside. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The knocking stopped after what felt like forever, but was probably only 30 seconds. Then I heard the footsteps moving away, back toward the storage rows, and I didn't hear anything else for the rest of the night. When the sun came up, I didn't wait for my replacement. I called Frank and told him I was sick and left 2 hours early. I never told him what happened. I just quit 2 days later over the phone and said I found another job. He didn't ask why. I think, looking back, he already knew something about that place, and maybe that's why he warned me about that unit in the first place. Before I left for good, I checked the schedule log from that night, the official company log, not mine. According to the system, no gate had opened, no motion sensor outside had triggered, nothing on record showed anyone or anything entering the lot. Just my handwritten note in the shift log, the one I wrote at 3 a.m. with a shaking hand, describing what I saw. I asked a coworker, a guy who worked the shift after mine, if he had ever noticed anything strange around Unit 1114. He said once, months before I started, he found the gate open at dawn with no explanation, and there were drag marks in the gravel leading toward the back fence. He said he never mentioned it to anyone because he figured no one would believe him. I still think about that night more than I'd like to. I never found out who owned Unit 1114, or what was inside it, or what was breathing behind those rows of metal doors. I never went back to check. Some nights, when it's quiet in my apartment, I think I can still hear that slow, wet breathing, and I wonder if whatever was circling that office ever figured out I was inside.